In this video, we'll look at the form and function of the optative mood as used in the Greek New Testament. Here are the main sources I have used for this video. 1. Fundamentals of New Testament Greek by Porter, Reed, and O'Donnell. 2. The Morphology of Biblical Greek by William Mounts. 3. Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics by Daniel Wallace. 4. A Beginning Intermediate Grammar of Hellenistic Greek by Robert Funk. 5. Biblical Greek Illustrated from Examples, or Illustrated by Examples, by Maximilian Zerwick. 6. A Grammar of the Greek New Testament in the Light of Historical Research by A.T. Robertson. My throat is a little bit raspy this morning, so now and then I'll take a sip of Coke. The Greeks had an elaborate verb system. Every verb in ancient Greek had tense, voice, mood, person, and number. In fact, there were 7 tenses, 3 voices, 4 moods, 3 persons, along with a singular and plural number. Actually, in very ancient Greek, there was a dual number denoting pairs of things that had become obsolete by the time of the classical period. In this video, we're focusing on one of the 4 grammatical moods, namely the optative mood. The 4 grammatical moods, sometimes called modes, in Biblical Greek are the indicative, the subjunctive, the imperative, and the optative. I think it would be helpful to first define what we mean by a grammatical mood. One of the best descriptions of this, I think, is found in Zerwick's Biblical Greek, listed in the sources at the beginning of this video. Zerwick summarizes tense, voice, and mood in a very compact but informative way. I quote from his book, "As ideas of what constitutes a mood are often somewhat vague, some explanation may not be out of place here. In any verbal enunciation, we may distinguish between the action expressed and the manner in which it is envisaged. The verbal voices and tenses regard the action itself, the voices relating it to its subject, the tenses fixing it in time, or as aspects exhibiting it simply or as in progress, etc. The moods or manners of envisaging the action regard the degree of actuality which is attributed to it, or rather its relation to actuality. An action may be represented simply as realized, the indicative, or as eventuality, subjunctive, or possibility, optative, or as to be realized by another, imperative." This is from chapter 10 of Zerwick's book. We're most at ease with the indicative and imperative moods since these correspond most closely with the use in the English language. The Greek subjunctive has a much more wide-ranging use than the English subjunctive mood. The Greek optative mood is probably the least appreciated by beginning students since it only occurs 68 times in the Greek New Testament. Because it is used so infrequently, it is usually not covered in great detail in beginners' grammars, and rightly so. A complete listing of these occurrences can be found on page 141 of Mounts' Morphology of Biblical Greek. Before digging into the optative in detail, we will briefly describe the indicative, the subjunctive, and the imperative moods. We will only look at a couple of simple examples of each, since these moods are not the focus of this video. First, the indicative mood. This is commonly called the mood of assertion. The assertion does not necessarily have to conform to reality. For example, a lie is usually told in the indicative mood. The indicative can also be used for questions of fact. Note that in the following examples, I have underscored corresponding Greek and English words. from 1 John, Teknia mu tafta grapho imin inami amartite. My little children, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. This is called the declarative indicative. And from Mark 8:27, Tina me legusin e anthropi ine. Whom do men say that I am? This use is called the interrogative indicative. Next, we look briefly at examples of verbs used in the subjunctive mood. This is the most commonly used non-indicative mood in the Greek New Testament. In simple terms, it is described as the mood of probability or eventuality. The subjunctive mood has numerous uses, among which are exhortations, prohibitions, purpose clauses, and deliberative clauses. The first examples come from the Greek Septuagint, Genesis 37:20. Nin un devte apakrinomen aftan keuripsomen aftan is anaton lakon. So now, come, let us kill him and let us throw him into one of the pits. These are called subjunctives of exhortation. And from 1 John 2:1, Teknia mu tafta grapho imin inami amartite. My little children, I am writing these things to you so that you may not sin. This use is called the subjunctive of purpose. The imperative mood is the mood of command or exhortation. From Matthew 6:19 we have me thesavrizete imin thesavrus epitis yis. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on the earth. This is called the imperative of command. And from John 14:1 we have me tarasesto imon e cardia. Let not your heart be troubled. This is an example of the imperative of exhortation. We saw previously that the subjunctive can also be used for exhortations. Now we look more closely at the optative mood. The name of this mood is derived from the Latin word opto, which means to desire or wish for. It is sometimes defined in simple terms as the mood of possibility. In the Greek New Testament, optatives only occur in the present and aorist tenses. This makes identification or parsing of optatives much easier than is the case with older classical Greek usage. We'll look first at a specific example and then talk in more detail about how to identify verbs in the optative mood. Consider Romans 6 verses 1 and 2. Ti un erumen epimenomen ti amartia ina e charis peanasi mi yenita itenes apethanomen ti amartia pos eti zisamen and afti. What shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin so that grace may increase? May it never be. How shall we who died to sin still live in it? The verb yenita at the beginning of verse 2 is in the optative mood. Paul uses its negation, mi yenita, 14 times in his writings. This phrase accounts for roughly 25% of all the optatives in the Greek New Testament. It is variously translated, may it never be, from the New American Standard Bible, God forbid, from the King James and American Standard versions, absolutely not, from the Net or New English Translation Bible, by no means from the English Standard, the New International, and the New Revised Standard versions. Paul commonly uses this phrase to strongly reject a false conclusion that could be drawn from his argument. The only occurrence of the phrase mi yenita outside of Paul's writings in the Greek New Testament is in Luke 20 verse 16. There are two other verses in the Greek New Testament that use the verb yanito without negation. One is in Luke 1, verse 38, and the other is in Acts 5, verse 14. The verb yanito is parsed as follows. Aorist tense, middle voice, optative mood, third person, and singular number. The lexical form, that is to say, present tense, active voice, indicative mood, first person, singular number, of this verb is yinome. Become, be born, be created, happen. Although this verb is middle in form, it has an active meaning. Many grammars label verbs that have middle passive endings but are active in meaning as deponent. Let's now see how to develop the parsing of this verb. We see that yanito has the unaugmented aorist stem yin. Recall that the non-indicative moods do not have an augment since time is not a factor. Then we have an omicron connecting vowel plus the optative mood indicator iota, which combines with the omicron to become the diphthong omicron iota, pronounced e in modern Greek. Finally, we have the third person singular secondary middle ending ta. According to Mounts in his Morphology of Biblical Greek, the optative mood uses secondary personal endings except in first person singular active verbs, in which case me is used instead of the usual ni. The stem yin is termed a thematic stem since it is followed by the connecting omicron vowel. It turns out that virtually all such stems of verbs in the optative mood are followed by an omicron connecting vowel. We next look at an example of the formation of a first aorist optative verb. Consider 1 Thessalonians 3:12. Imos there akirios pleonase ke perisevse ti agape is allelus ke is pandas kathaper ke emis is imos. And may the Lord make you increase and abound in love for one another and for all, as we do for you. The verbs pleonase and perisevse are both third person singular first aorist active optatives. It is easy to mistake them for first aorist active infinitives or first aorist middle imperatives because of the sigma alpha iota endings. One must look at the context to determine the mood in situations where the forms are identical. For these verbs, sigma alpha is the first aorist formative, which is then combined with the iota optative mood indicator. Recall that the secondary tenses imperfect, aorist, pluperfect have no personal ending in the third person singular. Looking up one verse at 1 Thessalonians 3:11, we find another optative, katevthine, that is very similar to the previous two examples, except that the stem ends in a liquid consonant so that sigma drops out and the tense formative becomes simply alpha instead of sigma alpha. Again, we have the tense formative adjoined to the optative mood indicator iota, with no personal ending since it is third person singular active. We next look at an aorist passive verb in the optative mood. It turns out that such verbs use a mood indicator of iota eta instead of simply iota. Look at the last phrase in 1 Peter 1:2. Charis imin ke irini plethin thei. May grace and peace be multiplied to you. Here, the verb plethin thei is parsed as aorist passive optative third person singular number. We see that theta epsilon, is the passive indicator with the optative mood indicator added. Remember that since this is third person, there is no personal ending as before. The mood indicator iota eta is also used for verbs in the so-called athematic conjugation. Recall in Greek there are two conjugation systems, thematic and athematic. Here's an example based on the verb didome, give, grant, bestow, of the athematic conjugation from Romans 15:5. Ade theos tis ipomonis ketis parakleseos dai imin ta afta phronin and alilis kata Christoni soon. May the God of endurance and encouragement grant you to live in such harmony with one another in accord with Christ Jesus. The verb dai is parsed as aorist, active, optative, third person singular. This is one form where it's probably best just to commit it to memory. The form of this optative verb may have come about as follows. The stem of this verb is delta omicron. Then the iota eta optative mood indicator is added to yield delta omicron iota eta. However, this is an older Greek form that got changed to the in Koine Greek according to A.T. Robertson, Word Pictures in the New Testament, Epistles of Paul. It's a guess on my part that the short omicron vowel lengthened and the iota from the mood indicator got subscripted under the long vowel omega. Lastly, we will look at a present tense optative verb in Acts 8:31. Ade ipen posgar on dinemin eon mitis ade yisi me parakalasen teton philippon anavanda kathise sin afto. And he said, well, how could I unless someone guides me? And he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. The verb dinemin is parsed as present tense, middle voice, optative mood, first person, singular number. In this example, the stem of the verb diname, am able, am powerful, is delta epsilon ni, din. Also, the connecting vowel is alpha instead of omicron. The optative mood indicator is iota. To this is added the usual secondary middle passive ending, mean. In this example, notice that the optative is used in combination with the particle on. This is termed the potential optative, meaning that it expresses what would happen if some condition is fulfilled. This completes the optative mood examples we wanted to look at in this video. The best advice I have for beginning students wanting to get more familiar with the optative mood is to go over the passages in the Greek New Testament where optatives are used and try to understand how they are formed. In other words, for each of the 68 optatives in the Greek New Testament, identify the stem, the connecting vowel, the mood indicator, and the personal endings. This is not quite as forbidding as it first seems, since a number of optative forms are repeated. For example, yanito occurs 17 times, doi occurs 4 times, echi occurs twice, dinendo occurs twice, and tichi occurs twice. I end this video with my usual cautionary note. In all matters of biblical Greek, I defer to the real scholars. Thank you for watching.